welcome back. This is sadly our fifth and final episode.
I think.
And there could be more.
I always think okay.
I like the way that this is starting already.
I'm sorry.
We've gotten a little stir crazy. You know, we've been through some stuff together through these episodes.
What I'm trying to say, and I feel this way about the album too, and about every album I make.
Yeah. Is
that I try to do everything with the understanding that anything could happen and I may never make one again. Right?
Totally.
You know, when it comes to music, like, who knows, maybe I do. The singer Pup is back, right? But was told at one point he would never sing again. Who knows if I do that to my throat? Maybe I'll never make another record.
Totally.
And so I always try to make sure that things end in a satisfying way in case there is no more of it. But I always want to be open to creating more of something that people want, that I feel enriched by.
So if you guys are begging for us to come back, we will. If you guys want us to come back and do the rest of the songs,
every song in the catalog, and
then I'll start writing new songs with Dan. We will.
We'll need to get ads and sponsors at that point, but you know what I mean.
No, it totally.
This is Blue Apron.
And yeah, we're sponsored by Staples. That was easy.
That's good. Anyway, we're talking about Spitting in the Wind.
We're talking about Spitting in the Wind.
Spitting in the Wind.
Off of In Lieu of Flowers, new Aaron West record. I am Holden.
I'm Dan.
And welcome back. And
this is the last one before people will hear the whole record, which is exciting.
Oh, so you guys have heard now 5 songs.
This will be the 5th song that people will hear.
Banger. Yeah. I'm so glad you guys have heard this one. I've been having to bite my tongue about it the whole time. Absolute banger. Love this song. I run to it basically every day. So really just excited to hear what everyone thinks. I don't know if there's a place for you to leave comments, but I personally, I want you to invite us back to do more, but I also want to know your thoughts on the record now. So now I guess we can really get into some more of the kind of lore and canon taking shape in real life, and the way that being Aaron West has informed Aaron West, and the way that Aaron West has informed being Dan Campbell.
Okay, that's a great frame for that question. So the thing about this is when I made the first record, I can't remember if I said this on one of these episodes or not. So if I did, I'm sorry for repeating myself, but I only have like 8 thoughts, and so you're gonna hear one.
And we'll just cycle through
those thoughts. Most of them are about football. So I made the first record as like I really would like to learn how to play guitar, and I really would like to step out of my box as a songwriter, and I'm going to make some songs. And then I was asked to play some shows. And I said, okay, I will play some shows. But I thought that it was strange to play those shows as Dan Campbell while singing these songs as Aaron West. And so I thought, well, let me just do the shows in character, and like, what could possibly be the ramifications of that? I'm only going to play these like
10 years later,
10 shows. And then people kept asking us to play shows, and it was a really enjoyable experience. And so I decided I was going to make a second record. And when I started plotting out the second album, and like I just said, I try to make sure that everything ends in a way that is satisfying in case I fall off of a cliff. Who knows?
I hope
you know
not.
What I saw a Snapple. I wrote this in a poetry book a million years ago. It's a Snapple fact that says like every year 2 people are pushed off of cliffs by bears.
Oh my God, by bears?
That's what it said.
I didn't even know that bears were near cliffs. I think of like woods and kind of
there's
like
cliffs and woods.
I guess there could be.
Anyway,
it's a big world.
If I get pushed off, if I'm one of those 2 people, I want to make sure I give a satisfaction.
If we are those 2 people,
it could be the 2 of us on a hike. Anyway, so in starting to write the second one, I had to, craft more narrative, and I started to realize that there was this constriction happening where I had just been on a stage saying my name is Aaron West, and the date was whatever, June 15th, and I'm in St. Louis. And so on June 15th, I cannot have Aaron West somewhere in Alaska. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't line up canonically. And so I realized I have to shape the story around what was happening, and Aaron was playing music on stages, and so he plays music on stages, and finding a way to weave that narrative through. And so when it came to this record, I thought, well, this could be to my advantage as well. Like this doesn't have to be a constraint. It could be a tool for expansion. And so I decided that I would work on the narrative in advance, and that I would push the narrative forward via the live events.
So you guys could have been here for some of this.
Yes.
You've seen it.
So I wanted to purposefully push the narrative forward through live events. And in that way, this is the way that I talk about often, that the only art form that I find to be correlative to this is professional wrestling. Because it changed what happens in front of an audience and on television on Monday Night Raw can impact how the story moves forward on Friday Night SmackDown, right? Like that's just the nature of the event. It's a live event telling serialized stories through what happens live. And so I was like, well, I love pro wrestling. I'm gonna do it like that. Like, that's what I'm gonna do. And so I crafted the narrative that the label has kept Aaron and the 20s in a holding pattern.
Boo.
Was a thing that happened. And okay, so I should say first, for people that don't watch pro wrestling, the two terms that I'm probably going to use are the three terms. I'm going to say work a lot. And work is, when you're working a crowd, when an angle is a work, it means that it is a pre-scripted story and you're attempting to get the crowd to believe in that. Another one is that it's a shoot, which is when something happens for real. And I think one of the greatest successes of a pro wrestling story is when you can work a crowd into believing something is a shoot. And then I'm going to say kayfabe, which is just another word for when it is. Which I pronounced as
kifabe the other day to Dan, and he very generously just corrected me, didn't even flinch.
I mean, it's a weird word. Because I first encountered it in books as well. And so anyway, that would be when something is part of the narrative storyline.
Yes.
In the reality of the story, but not in the reality of reality. So I started planting the seeds for these things to happen. I was playing these shows and I said something to the effect of, like, I'm going to be playing in Los Angeles next month. And the reason that we're going there is that first I said, does anyone know what an option is? And the really brief explanation of an option period for a record contract is, let's say you sign a contract and it's for one album and two options. Those options are label options. And so basically it says, if the label wants to after the first one, they will exercise the option to put out the next one under a predetermined budget and royalty split and all of these things, right? But it's the label's choice as to whether or not they're going to activate that option, and they can say no, and you feel free to go make music with other people. We don't feel this relationship is working, or we'd like to continue in the business of this artist, and so we're activating our option. And so what I said is the label has not made up their mind about this option period, and it's been frustrating. But we're going to LA and we're going to play a show. And if any of you have friends in LA, please tell them to come, because the more people in the room, the better the reaction, the better chances of us getting the option picked up and being able to put out new music will be. And then we got to LA at this venue called the Peppermint Club, which is much swankier than...
And was that a deliberate choice? Like, were you like, we need to go to this really posh place because the irony will not be lost on the crowd?
It was just the only available room, but it ended up perfect for this specific purpose, right? So it was such a posh place that they told us in advance, if your fans show up in shorts, they will not be allowed in despite buying a ticket. So we had to make sure we told people this. And narratively, as people are aware by now, Aaron starts drinking again, first in a celebratory fashion and then in a much sadder and lonelier fashion.
Yeah.
And this is the first time he's back on tour since making the decision to do that again. And on stage at the Peppermint Club, we're trying to work the crowd. And so the band is handing me drink after drink, which are
iced tea,
but it's iced tea. And I am getting angrier and angrier at the record label until the end of the set, where I end up crumbling up a ball of the set list in a ball of paper and throwing it at their table because of the layout of the venue and the swankiness of it and the normal clientele. There's a VIP table right by the stage that we were able to put the label at,
the
and I was
label.
able to point at them and say, those are the record label people, and you need to tell them that they should allow us to put this record out. And then throughout the night, that goes from a joke to me screaming at them, and then CJ, our bass player, grabbing me and trying to calm me down, and the crowd kind of booing them, and
the crowd engaged, started to really believe it.
And even beyond this show, I kept the work up. So the next time I played, I was like, hey, if you wouldn't mind, I kind of fucked things up with the label, and if you could just send them a message on Instagram and just let them know
if you want to hear this record
that you would like to hear the record, and you can do it politely. And the person I want you to address it to is Eric Tobin, who is the head of A&R at Hopeless. And And I chose Eric for a couple of reasons. One, because I thought that he could take it.
At what point did you engage Eric in this sort of grift, if you will?
He was aware that I was going to do it before the LA show, but I did not tell him that I was going to tell people to send messages.
Okay.
And I thought that he could handle it. And I also thought that it's just from a songwriting perspective, I think it's very boring if I keep referring to the label as the label in the lyrics. And so I thought, like, well, let's put a face to it and let's pick a name.
My buddy Eric.
It's Eric. So yeah, that's kind of like the way that I was able to use the live events to establish canon and further the narrative, which is just like not a thing I can think of other bands doing. It's a thing I'm really excited about. It's like my favorite thing about this project.
Was it fun?
It was really fun. It was really fun. I don't think I'm a particularly strong actor, but I think it was really fun.
You can lose yourself in the moment. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's so cool that people who are listening to this right now might have been in that room and they were like, wait, it's not real? I thought that this record was coming out because we convinced the label to do it.
That would have been really good. That would have been really good.
But I also, I mean, this is the last song that we're talking about, and it's such a kind of climactic moment for the record. In a lot of ways, I think of Spinning as the kind of explosion before the turn. This is like the big moment where everything breaks down. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just from jump, the song starts like a bullet. I mean, it's like it immediately kind of, you go right into the song, you go right into the music. There's this kind of like furious establishment of like breathlessness and stakes and like plunging towards something that you can't outrun. And something that we were talking about with this song is that it's using a lot of different narrative mechanics to establish those stakes. And we talked about the fact that there's a kind of logic to the world of this song, and I want to talk about Rosa as a character and how, you know, you chose to bring her in because you're in LA. You know, of course, you're going to see your old friend. Mm-hmm. It makes sense that Aaron would invite her to the show. But planting her so early on also gives the song clear stakes. It's like Rosa is watching him perform. He's going to be nervous. For
the first time in years. They haven't seen each other in years at this point, right? The song is taking place in January of 2023. Whoa. And the last time that he saw Rosa was 2016. Jesus, it's been a long time since they've seen each other. And a whole pandemic has passed in between that. And yeah, it's like, it's not just a narrative callback for the sake of narrative callback. I think that one of the things about breaking these songs narratively is that things have to happen logically and have to progress logically, and still have to serve the greater map of the narrative. Yeah. And so I knew from a greater narrative perspective that what is going to happen in this song, that it's going to end up with a blowout, a fight, screaming at the label, screaming at the band, a big storm out. And the drinking is obviously a big reason for that, but there's underlying tones and tensions. And I think about sometimes the Stranger by Camus, and
I bet you do.
And
of course you do, Dan.
And I think about the different ways that we can become overwhelmed. Like in like a sensory way, and it happens to, I mean, obviously without a murder, happens to me all of the time with a lot of sounds or a lot of different stressors pushing from a lot of different directions. And I think that it's like the most common reason for someone to like really snap. It's not one thing. It's a bunch of these disparate things coming together to cause this tension. And so, okay, well, Rosa's coming. That's great. But it makes me nervous. Mm-hmm. And because I'm nervous, I'm going to drink more than I already was going to drink. Right. And that's going to pose a problem. So it both logically makes sense in the story. Rosa would be there. They're in LA. But it furthers the narrative.
It's an inciting incident.
Yeah. And I also just wanted to mention, when you said the propulsion of the song, two things about it. One is that I'm really, or I try to be very aware of ebb and flow dynamically on records. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to hear a record and hear it as kind of this like monolithic block of sound. I want it to dip and to rise. I think it makes it much easier to listen to and to grab like footholds. And so, that helps coming out of Whiplash into this song. The juxtaposition is huge.
Totally.
I think also the kind of like we're speeding off a cliff of it, that propulsive rhythm is big. And then the other thing that I really try to do in songs, and I think one of the most important things about my songwriting, or one of like maybe the hallmarks of it, is that I like to start songs with lyrics that drop you into a story as though you are coming into a conversation late and trying to catch up.
In media res.
Is that the term?
Yes, that is the literary
What do you
device.
have, an MFA or something?
From NYU. Sorry, please continue.
And so, yeah, like it never rained in LA the whole year that I lived here. It's like, wait, how did I get, what?
It's raining.
And immediately you know a lot about the story and you're desperate to catch up to where we are.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing. And I think that's true of basically every song we talked about, right? Like Rain on the Roof of Your Parked Car as the start of a song. With No One Told the Birds the World Was Ending. What was episode 3? Alone in St. Luke's?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. Like the numbers
the graffiti
right now.
on the wall says fuck the Tories.
Yeah.
And then
such a good line.
Like a gun in a Bible. It's just, they're all lines that are supposed to, like, you're supposed to be hooked in from the very beginning of the song. And I think this is just a one worth mentioning.
Totally. And also it sort of speaks to what I said last episode with Whiplash, which is like it felt like this kind of eye of the storm. There are these like roiling hurricanes on either side of it on the record. And that I think the dynamics between Whiplash and Spitting, there's these like two different lows that he reaches. There's like the depressive low, which is Whiplash, and there's the angry low, which is Spitting.
And I think you get that the second verse of the song, and it goes back to the intertextuality of it.
Totally.
Right. And so there's the reference to grapefruit, which again is a balance of logic and like finding ways to narratively connect things. Right. But I think and this isn't, I don't mean to make this like an actual diatribe against record labels, because it's not, right? But there is a disconnect sometimes between, especially bigger labels than ours, and the artists that are on them and the reality of their lives, right? And so when a label would do something to artists, and this happened a lot more in like the early aughts, but like wait to release their album and kind of leave it on a shelf, to the label, it's potentially a fiscal decision, a marketing decision, an allotment of resources decision, sure. To the artist, their entire life has become a holding pattern, which means that now maybe they have to go back to their shitty job. And maybe now they're working on garage doors in the cold and they break their hand. And the disconnect, the dissonance between the person who breaks their hand pouring concrete for a new driveway and the people who made the decision about that, it can be a Grand Canyon size gulch, right?
Yeah.
And so when Aaron is on stage,
The suits and the halogen glow, there's this
looking
real...
at these people at their VIP table, laughing and spilling their drinks and not paying attention to him bearing himself on stage in front of these people in an attempt to convince them to release more of his music. And then feeling his hand cramp up, and I picked grapefruit because there's so many bar chords in grapefruit, and my hand does cramp up in it. Feeling that his hand cramp up because of having it broken, having the pins taken out of it, and the disconnect between those two worlds is really one of the things that sends him off the edge. Yeah. But then, of course, the band is not going to be pleased with their front person screaming at the record label on a night when we were trying to impress them.
Yeah. And we talked about this earlier. We talked about this when we talked about the sort of realities of touring for musicians. And we talked about this with Whiplash also, that, Aaron isn't the only one in this band, that the rest of the band is also reliant on this project for material resources and for financial means. And I think that there's a big shift that happens that's catalyzed by the drinking and the anger, where earlier in the record, Aaron is allowing himself to be concerned with the repercussions on others that his actions will have.
Yeah, you get that in paying bills. But once he's drinking again,
it goes out the window.
You lose it. And a big moment of the song is obviously the end, and we could talk about the end, but the thing I wanted to mention first, or most specifically, was the trading vocals.
Yeah.
And it kind of runs parallel to what we did at Alone in St. Luke's, where the music totally stops, and or what we did in Paying Bills, where it's him and his sister harmonizing, and you feel the family. There's a reason I chose another voice here. It's CJ Cliff, who plays bass, and it's not just because his tone of his voice can match the intensity of mine, which it can. He's a great singer. He was in a band called the 60s. But it's that going back and forth, the argument. I'll see you in the water. No, I'll see you in the water. No, I'll see you in the water. And it's just like, I want it to feel like, fuck you, no, fuck you, no, fuck you. Yeah. And then one of them storms out.
Totally.
Was kind of the big goal of that big ending. We talked a lot about, like, when you're writing a batch of songs as a whole album, trying to make sure you break tendencies sometimes. And I wanted a song where the chorus was not so much a chorus. And so... And the touchstone for it is something like Bobby Jean, right? Where it's just like, hey, here's just this one word, this one phrase, and then we're turning it over to the horn section. And Chemina, Dave, Joe, and Juan wrote this awesome horn lick that really like kind of revolves and pulls you through the chorus in a really cool way. And so I think it's funny that you hear my other band in it, and I'm like, no, I'm thinking Bobby Jean by
You're
Bruce
like, nah,
Springsteen.
it's Bruce, actually. It's the boss.
And then some Menzingers too,
Totally. Well, but I mean, and it's so effective, I think, for so many reasons. Also, there's just like that really tight, a kind of masterful, I mean, I really want to give credit to your lyrics here, because like the ABC like tercets, like the rhyme scheme where every line changes each time, but they do rhyme perfectly. Like the construction of that.
It took me a long time to construct
say,
the rhyme scheme for this song. Yeah. Especially the first verse.
Totally.
Because the first verse, a lot of times where I write songs, what I write is a first verse and a chorus, and then maybe a bridge, and then the second verse is usually the last thing to happen. It's like a space I leave blank, and it's much easier to write a second verse because the map has been built. This first verse took me so fucking long to find the rhyme scheme and to make it work and to continue the narrative. Is because, again, like we're purposefully constraining narrative inside of a song. And now I'm like, I have to get all of this story where we're in LA, it's raining, Rosa is there, I'm drinking, I'm nervous. All that has to get into that one verse, and it has to work in a rhyme scheme and everything. And it just, that was a real under the hood mechanic moment of that song for sure.
Well, it feels so crafted. I mean, and I think it also, like, in the way that this song kind of feels like it's like dynamite. Like there's all of these, like it's so technical the way that the explosion has to happen, because there are all of these different vectors that are crumbling in Aaron's life. And one of the things that I love about Rosa's presence is that it is a kind of like anti-corporatist song. Like it's this kind of screed against the like material disregard of the labels of the suits. But it's also like putting one of his friends, someone who he has this emotional connection to, in the room changes the tenor. So it's not just this angry song that's kind of like, fuck the suits. It's like he's also like willing to sacrifice, or forced by drink to sacrifice, the like emotional, sentimental connections in his life with his friend, with his band. And I think the triangulation of those things, like there are so many kind of like triangles or sets of threes in Aaron's life. And there's like the family unit, and then there's, in each of these songs, I feel like so many of the verses return to, it's like there's the Colin verse, the Sam verse, and the band verse, or there's Rosa, the band, and the label. Yeah. And I think like that's why I love the sort of like triad structure of the end of this song, because it's like pop, 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 like here each of these three things have to go.
I think that it's so, yeah, exactly. And it's following this narrative that starts really, to me, at the end of Monongahela Park, which people will be able to hear probably around the time that they hear this podcast. Exciting. And it's all of the ways that when something good is presented to Aaron, he has to destroy it because he's not confident enough in himself to accept it. Right. And you see it there. That's the fissure, the first crack in it. And then the drinking just expedites the process. Yeah. And here you're in a situation where your friend is here, your sister's here, your band is here. They all love you. They all are rooting for you. and you got to blow it up. He's got to fuck it up.
Yeah.
It's it's a line that is forthcoming, but if there's a way to fuck it up, I'm gonna find it.
Yeah.
I think we should bring on our special guest.
We have a special guest. You guys aren't going to believe this. I didn't even know that this was his real name. It was shocking to me that this is true, real life. We have the eponymous Eric in the house. This is the Eric. His name is actually Eric.
This is Eric Tobin, head of A&R for Hopeless Records. Send him your demo.
Welcome, Eric. Welcome to the pod.
Please do. Thank you, Dan Campbell character. Thank you for having people send me more demos.
You're very welcome.
In a different version of Dan's life, he stood in front of some 1,000 or so people and announced my phone number and email to them accidentally. He says accidentally.
It wasn't his phone number. It's just his email, but it was fully by accident. It was like The Simpsons, like Lisa S. No, that's too obvious. L. Simpson. It was like that moment.
Totally.
It was good because I think I thought maybe coming off of the Aaron West calling me out, there was some sort of vendetta that Dan and his family secretly had for me, which was very exciting.
No vendetta. I love you very much. Thank you for doing
I love
this.
you too. I'm happy to be here.
Can I ask you some questions?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first thing I want to know is what the experience was like at the Peppermint Club, because you and Aaron Choi and Josh Epple were told in advance that I was going to do this, right? You expected it to come. You knew how it played into the record. But what did it feel like viscerally in the room? Because you were being legitimately booed. The crowd got worked. And then also, if I just may add, there were other Hopeless employees there that I did not have their phone number and were not keyed into the story. So now.
Well, I sometimes think after all these years, I've had enough of bands that are willing to call you out that have some practice in this. But when you mentioned it, I was like, great, no problem. Let's see how it is. Peppermint Club is I don't have the right words to explain this club to you. It's way too fancy for a label like us. But if you're really calling out suits for a showcase, it's a fantastic place to do it. And it's tough to think of yourself as a suit. You come home after the show and you look in the mirror and you say, ugh, maybe I am this guy. I had no idea. It's caused thank God for therapy. As far as our feeling, I mean, it's, obviously we've been a part of the narrative for some time and we love it. I think that the experience for us, you don't know what to expect. And if I remember correctly, some things got thrown, which was fun. And, I think some of the staff that didn't know, I could see the looks on their faces like, and there were people that Aaron and I sat down, Aaron, my coworker, and we sat down next to them and they were strangers. We're like, we work at the label. It's very exciting. And they're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. We love Aaron West. And then in the middle of it, he starts calling us out. You could see this couple becoming visibly uncomfortable next to us. They're like, oh, son of a, we sat next to the enemy. Oh my God. And I looked at Aaron. I was like, well, this is happening right now. We were in the VIP booth behind the staff up front. And I think from the standpoint, they looked uncomfortable. We had to explain it the next day. Like, this is part of that narrative. Like, oh, okay. Because look, when you first start working at the label, it's very exciting. Maybe for some of us old folks, Aaron and I have been at Hopeless for almost 19 years. So some of the new people, it's a big exciting thing. They don't want to be called out by anybody. It'd be just a one bad note on the internet is up for conversation. To be called out in front of everyone in this nice Hollywood club, I could see that they were feeling a little bit worried and concerned. And I think for all of us, we're letting this happen. And for Josh, myself, and Aaron, it was a lot of fun to be there and see it, especially as it fits the narrative.
I think that Josh told me that some of the did you guys have your new spring interns? So
we had some new
January,
interns,
so they just started there, and
horrified.
They were early in the set because the idea is that it progressed, right? Aaron gets drunker and angrier. So at the beginning, it's just like, let him know you want to hear a new record from us. And Josh told me one of the interns leaned over and went like, hey, I don't want to speak out of turn, but this show is sold out and these people are really excited. We should probably put this record out, right? We should probably do it.
There was a lot of advocation. It's amazing how Aaron West can really make people feel bad for him in that way. They're like, really, they're like, you can't let this man down. Yes, we did. It is true. One of the interns was like, are we not going to put this out? And
so then we followed that up with the set at 2000 Trees. And at 2,000 Trees, I told people, at that point, I had made the decision that your name specifically was going to go in the record. And I don't know if you knew that yet.
I didn't.
But I,
Serenaded.
first of all, it fit the syllables that I needed.
Totally.
And I just thought
it was for the prosody.
Yeah. And so anyway, I think, so at that show, I told people to please send Hopeless Records messages and tell them you want this record, and specifically address them to Eric Tobin. And I just wanted to know what I remember you telling me you got a phone call from someone whose job it is to read the messages. And I just want to know what kind of panic was in their voice and what your response was and how that felt to everybody there.
Well, yes. First of all, Brandy, who's amazing, runs our socials, is like, we're getting a lot of DMs that are direct. That's funny. Yeah, and Brandy's like, we're getting a lot of, and I like the way that we're both from New England, so the delivery's like, you're getting a lot of messages directly to you about putting out the Aaron West record. I don't know if you know that or not. I'm like, I don't. Some are pretty nice, some are pretty off. And I'm like, and I was like, well, there's always a new day. I think I take everything with, whatever this is, I'm not going to worry about it until somebody tells me to. But there were so many coming in, and I got a few DMs directly in the sort of stranger pot on Instagram that were like, I can't believe you're not going to put this record out, sort of. And I'm like, wow, the power of this man on stage. He, I just, and I had to text Dan. I was like, getting a lot of hate communication. Yeah, a lot of hate mail. And he goes, oh yeah, I called you out on stage. It's like, great
Good.
news. He goes, oh, by the way, you're going to be in the record. I was like, great, cool.
By the way, we also dropped your social security number and your home address.
I think it was, I don't know whether that's my personality type to expect the worst of things. When it came, I was like, okay, that's what's happening on this Monday. That's how it's going to go.
I love that it's Brandy because she was not keyed in at all.
That is so funny.
There was no warning that these messages, all of a sudden their inbox is full.
She was like, I thought we have a pretty good relationship with Dan. I don't really know what
Seems
happened.
like, yeah.
We've had a long journey with
we
them.
successfully worked the crowd. They got worked.
They got work, and they took it upon themselves to really go out there in that moment.
Legitimately believed it was a shoot. And then, Eric, if I could ask you one final question. So,
sure.
You are, I said this earlier, but you were the person that believed in me as an artist first in the industry. You believed in our bands. And then when I brought you the idea for Aaron West, which I'm sure sounded confounding at the time, especially because part of it was, I'm going to learn to play guitar. Don't worry about that part. I just want to know what it was about Aaron West that you feel is special and valuable to the label, and why you made the decision to bring it in and to keep it for this long. To actually exercise the options.
Exercise the option.
Yeah.
It's not a complicated answer. I mean, Dan, we've worked with you for a long time, and I think that bringing something into the company, all of us together as a team, and saying, hey, there's another Dan Campbell project and I want to be a part of it. And I think that first questions, you work at a company, the questions will come up, but it's always, this is Dan, this is Soupy, this is the guy we've trusted. Wonder Years has been an enormous win for the organization, for everybody, the community. And I think that I believed in you from the beginning, Dan, and you not only, you hopefully know this, you're not only you're not just an artist, like I enjoy getting a Christmas card from you. You are a friend, someone that it's not uncommon for me to say, I know nothing about football, please help. Or I have a philosophical issue. And I sat with you in a Best Buy parking lot. I went over, the entirety of the ideas of the Greatest Generation. And when you came to me with this other idea, I said, Dan is writing American novels, and he may not think that in his heart, but I know that out here, and this character sounds great. I do think but I'm going to learn how to play guitar had me somewhat concerned. And I was telling earlier, you did show up at my house with a guitar, and I believe your wife was there at the time, or maybe before you were married. And you were like, look, I'm going to play it for you. And you brought this thing out, and you really wanted to show me that you could play the guitar. I think it was your biggest goal, was to show me. I was like, Dan, I believe in this. It's okay. We got this. And when we started working on it, we just, it's such an interesting project. I can see Aaron and I in Chicago. At the time it was, I forgot who opened. They're pretty big now. Bunny.
Beach Bunny.
Beach Bunny opened for you.
It was the Riot Fest post show at Sleeping Tavern.
Post show. And we're all there, and I'm watching this, and I'm seeing people who showed up to see Soupy, and about half the half the folks in the room knew, and half were like, does Dan drink? And I think that in that moment I was like, wow, this this character's so real, and I love that people don't get it. And I think that for us, whether we're all just resident sappy kids or whatever else at the office, I think I was talking to Aaron this morning, and I think that you sort of understand as you get to know the journey of Aaron West, we all become interested in knowing what's coming next. And I think we all feel part of it. Like for each of us in this process of whether there's the intern who's worried not going to put out the record, or myself who's been around for probably too long now, you can sort of feel a different part of who you are through the story of Aaron West. And Aaron West feels so real that I think that it's an incredibly meaningful project. And again, it's an incredibly meaningful novel. There's a phone call I have 3 times a year saying, when do I get this novel, graphic or not? And I'm a real pain in the ass about it. I think we're just invested in the idea and what it brings to us on an emotional level. And we, as much as it's funny to get all the DMs or maybe worrisome, it's been so much fun. It's different than there's a story arc we know is going to happen. There's hopefully some point where there's a resolve and an end, and maybe not. With the other artists, it's always just a song about, hey, we're putting out songs where, I'm not disparaging any of our artists, but this is a real story. And we love it. We love being a part of it. It's very inspiring to be a part of it. I think it's very meaningful in the community, and that's still what we do at Hopeless. I
appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. Those very kind words. I think that that's the end of our podcast series. That's the end of our short run for now, right? Like I said,
for now.
Everything is for now or forever, and we'll find out later. I think you guys should
all send messages to Eric begging Dan
you're going to want to send a message to Hopeless Records on Instagram and just address it to Eric Tobin specifically.
Yes. Eric Tobin at hotmail.com.
At hotmail.com. He's like, fuck, that was my personal email.
I just changed my email and now I'm doxxed again. But yeah, I mean, I just want to say, if I may, that I also fucking love this record, and I'm so proud to have gotten to talk to you about it and to have heard about it.
No one better I could have asked.
From its inception to now, and I'm so excited for everybody listening to hear the whole thing. I think you are going to love it. I think that you are all going to be devastated and moved and frustrated and relieved and proud of Aaron and his journey. And I think that I'm also so excited for everyone to hear where the record goes. There's a cheeky little ending on the final song that made me cry, so I'm sure it will also make many of you cry at home. And I'm just, proud to be a part of this, and I love working with Dan and getting to talk shop with him. So thank you for having me on and for making this record and for making this project, and thank you, Eric, for believing in this crazy neurotic genius that we love so much.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate both of you. I appreciate Josh behind the computer, Joe over there fact checking for me,
Josh,
and everyone that watched any or listened to any of these episodes. Very cool of you. Please listen to the record. Please come out to one of the shows. We want to play it live for you more than anything else.
Hell yeah.
All right. That's it for Singing at Brick Walls. Singing at Brick Walls, an Aaron West podcast about In Lieu of Flowers, presented by Holden.
By Holden and Dan.
And Dan, thank you.
Thank you, and good night.
Good night.